Abreu is president of the New York Women's Chamber of Commerce, a nonprofit organization dedicated to promoting diversity and inclusion initiatives for women and minority entrepreneurs and professionals. Born in the Dominican Republic, Quenia was raised in New York City by a village of strong women who inspired her to believe at an early age that the key to gender and racial and ethnic equality is economic empowerment and growth. In 2002, Quenia and a group of businesswomen and community leaders founded the first Women's Chamber of Commerce in New York City and state. Today, the organization represents over 7,000 small businesses. Since the pandemic's onset, the New York Women's Chamber of Commerce has pivoted to help minority and women businesses and enterprises which have been disproportionately hit by the health crisis and ensuing economic downturn. Quenia instituted a regular series of over 100 New York Women's Chamber of Commerce virtual and in-person programs advising MWBEs of coping strategies and working directly with businesses to help struggling small business owners reopen and procure grants as well as paycheck protection program loans. Through these efforts, she has helped over 2,000 small businesses survive. Due to her ongoing collaboration with elected officials and community leaders to help pass Local Law 129, now MWB Local Law 1 and Article 15A, which mandates WBE participation in state and city projects, Abreu became a member of the MWBE advisory boards for the mayor, the School Construction Authority, and the Department of Education. She was recently appointed to a statewide board guiding the reopening strategy during COVID-19 and to the board of directors of the Jacob Javits Center. Quenia has received many awards and recognition for her work. This year, she was named to Crain's New York Business Notable Hispanic Leaders and Executives. Within the span of 6 months, she made the City and State's Power of Diversity Latino 100 and was voted Civic Diversity Hero by Crain's New York Business. Under Quenia's leadership, the New York Women's Chamber of Commerce has provided technical assistance and training to more than 20,000 entrepreneurs, assisted with the creation of 10,000 new businesses, and aided entrepreneurs in accessing $45 million in capital and $65 million in procurement contracts. The New York Women's Chamber of Commerce has helped over 5,000 entrepreneurs apply for MWBE certification through its MWBE Center and Women's Micro Enterprise Institute. It was such a great honor to have this discussion with Quenia. She's a true champion for inclusion, diversity, and economic empowerment. So let's jump in. So, hello everyone. I'm so excited to introduce a longtime friend and colleague, Quenia Abreu, who is the president of New York Women's Chamber of Commerce. Such a dynamic organization bringing valuable insight, education, and advocacy to the minority business community in New York City and really beyond. Throughout the state, her organization is a model for how to just properly engage businesses and implement the right solutions to address their needs. And so today we're going to discuss all of the dynamic programs that Quenia has in place, all of her vision for the organization, and her call to action for our elected officials, for our philanthropic sector, our CDFI sector, the community development finance institutions, and all of the stakeholders out there who play a role in improving the lives of, improving the environment for businesses. So Quenia, so happy to have you join us. Welcome.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Anasa. I'm very happy to be here.
Okay, wonderful. So we've known each other for quite some time, and during the early years of New York Women's Chamber of Commerce, I think we met in 2005 or so.
Yeah.
And I'm so amazed to see how you've grown the organization over 2 decades, right? You're celebrating your anniversary very soon. What was your inspiration? What kind of sparked that interest in establishing New York Women's Chamber of Commerce?
Yes. And thank you for that introduction, Anasa. Yes, and we go way back. Yes, almost 20 years. 20 years. We've actually made 20 years now. We're celebrating our 20-year anniversary in August. And yep, it's been an amazing journey. I gotta tell you that. And when we started, like everything, I'll tell you, when we started the New York Women's Chamber of Commerce, it was supposed to be just a group of women entrepreneurs coming together to network, to learn from each other. That was really how we started the New York Women's Chamber. That was the purpose, the objective. And we started that at that time because I was the director of the Women's Business Center for the Hunts Point Economic Development Corporation. The center is one of the centers that are funded by the SBA that we still have around. And so I was their first director. And one of the things that I would always advise women was to go and join, business organizations. And so I really thought that there was a women's chamber in the city and the state of New York, because I have seen them in other states. And so they will come back and say, look, we joined this chamber and we joined this association, but it's mainly men. It's mainly men, and it's mainly white men that are part of these associations, and we don't feel comfortable there. So I said, okay, so why don't we just start, something? And so I looked, I researched, and I said, I thought, as I said before, I thought we had the New York Women's Chamber of Commerce in the state of New York. So after I researched, I said, no, there's nothing. I can't believe that the city that has so many women entrepreneurs doesn't have a Women's Chamber of Commerce. So we started that. And then little by little, it became what it is today. And the way that happened, it was very organic. We started just, as I said before, doing networking events, coming together as a group. But women started asking for more. They wanted more than just a networking organization. They started talking about their needs for services that were not available to them. And that's how we then became more than a networking group. We became a business service or business development provider at the same time, responding to the needs of women, and primarily responding to the need of women of color, women entrepreneurs of color. That's how we started.
That's incredible. So Quenia, you're such a connector. You are always collaborating and bridging gaps. And I know that has a lot to do with what drives your organization forward and your success. Can you talk through just your key services, what you offer right now, and your accomplishments that you're proud of to date?
Yes. So as I said, we have been developing programs and services, really responding to the needs of our women entrepreneurs, and primarily our women of color. So we have, under the New York Women's Chamber, we have our Women Micro Enterprise Institute. And so what that does is provide training, educational programs, and one-on-one technical assistance to the micro enterprises. And the reason why we did that separate and label it that, is because a lot of the small businesses, the so-called small businesses in the city of New York, are micro enterprises. And there has never really been a definition really of micro enterprises. The Small Business Administration has the definition of small businesses, but small businesses, by definition of these agencies, are really big businesses, 500 employees, $1 million corporations. And our small businesses here in the city of New York are really mom and pop, what we call mom and pop. They're small businesses. You have the beauty salons, you have the barbershops, you have the restaurants, a lot of our restaurants. So we develop a whole line of services just for them based on their needs, based on their size. And so we do for them also financing. We don't have a loan program ourselves. What we do is partner with a lot of different organizations. As you mentioned, we connect people also to resources if we don't have them, because that's important. To us, the most valuable thing is to be able, when a business comes to us, the business owner, is to be able to help them in any way that we can. So when we don't have the service ourselves, then we will connect them with the network of resources that we have. So that's a a women's micro enterprise. And then we have, so under that, we have, for instance, the program that we do for women in the beauty industry. You know how we have so many beauty salons in the city of New York, and we have training that is specific for them, that has to do with regulations, that has to do with licenses and compliance, because industries are different, as you know. So we have that. Then we have also our Fund Her program that we started a couple of years ago, which is a grant program for them as well, for the micro enterprises. And then we also have, there's so many programs that we have. So we have the our Chamber on the Go program, where we go and visit the businesses throughout the city of New York. We have our business specialists that go and do that, and they go around the city and they go and visit, and they what they do is do a business assessment. They do an assessment of their needs, and based on that assessment, then those businesses are connected with city resources, with Department of Small Business Services. They also work with us in some area, work with them in some areas. But that program specifically is to make sure that the small businesses know what resources the city has to offer. Because, as you know, small businesses are so busy, they're not going to go into city agencies to figure out, okay, what do they do? How can they help us? So we bring that to them. So that's our chamber, literally our Chamber on the Go program. And then we have our NYWCC services, which we're very well known for. We are one of the original organizations that work with the city council many years ago to pass local law 129, which is now local law 1, which is the NWB law. So since then, since that law became into effect, we have been working with the city to make sure that our women and minorities become certified with the city of New York as a women or minority-owned business, to then be able to access, to be able to obtain contracting opportunities with city agencies and those corporations, big companies that do business with the city. And that's an area that it's very dear to me, because as you know, the city buys billions of dollars in products and services. And traditionally, the percentage of opportunities that went to people of color like you and me has always been very tiny, very tiny. And so we needed to change that. We still need to change it, because even though we have made a lot of progress, we're still not there yet. So the NYWCC services are very important to the New York Women's Chamber of Commerce. And we have under that, and Anasa, we have our Contract Her program, which has become one of the most popular programs. And Contract Her is a capacity building program that, I mean, it's right now is my favorite program of all, because what it does, and we do it once a year, and is a training program, is a business accelerator program. And what it does is bring in those women entrepreneurs already certified with the city and state, but are having challenges, just obtaining the contracting opportunities. So the program, we provide training, and we provide one-on-one, very intensive one-on-one with them, to make sure to help them build their capacity, to help them navigate the whole, selling to government, which is very difficult, because that is the truth, and to be able to identify and apply for those contracting opportunities. So right now, and again, we are really focusing on women of color, because the women of color, in that MWB world, are the ones that get the lowest percentage of contract, like 1.5%. So that's really for what this program is for them. And so this year we have, I think it's 40 women that are participating in the new one, and all of them are women entrepreneurs of color, which makes me very, very happy.
Wow, that's incredible, Quenia. And I'm just curious, in what industries are represented among the contractor?
In the contractor, when we started, a lot of them were in the construction industry or construction related industry. But what we have done, again, because we looked at where was really the disadvantage, where were women, because the city, launched this huge campaign to get women of color certified, not just women of color, but just every possible person that they could get certified. This was under the de Blasio administration. They were very much about the numbers of certified companies, to increase that, which is great, but at the end of the day, the objective is really to help them get the opportunities, the economic opportunities, the contracting opportunities. So there was a lot of women, we realized, that were in other industries that were not being looked at, that were not getting the opportunity. So what we have tried to do now is diversify the group. So we have now women that are more in professional services. We have women that are in, for instance, like event planning, film, that are certified. We have women that are in the food industry that are certified, that we're working with to help them access those contracts. So we have looked at, okay, where the groups, in what industries are these women that are not getting the opportunities. So now that's what we're doing, is just bringing those in to make sure that they are connected and that they are getting the contracts.
That's great. Wow. So talk through some of the challenges, that your businesses face, some of the, challenges that you find are unique to minority businesses, particularly the micro enterprises, and kind of what, a few of those stories, one or two of those stories, and then kind of what that recovery is looking like at this moment.
Yes. Well, I'll tell you, small businesses, micro enterprises in the city of New York, they have always have challenges, because especially if they're minority owned businesses, you have your tradition, like access to finance, access to funding has always been a big challenge. The amount of employees that they need, personnel, to deal with regulations. The city has so many regulations in place, and they get fined left and right, especially if you're in the food industry. You get a lot of fines, because there's so many agencies also that regulate the small businesses. One of the things that the city doesn't do very well, and the state doesn't do very well, Anasa, is to educate the businesses when it comes to that, to compliance. Because, we get a lot of people that come in, they have a dream. The majority of the people that open businesses are people that have a dream, and a lot of them are immigrants. A lot of them are from disadvantaged communities. And so they have they save their money, and they go and they open a business because they have this beautiful, entrepreneurship dream. But that doesn't mean that they know that they have the skills for the craft, for the trade that they go into, but that doesn't mean that they have the managerial experience. That doesn't mean that they have the accounting, finance experience, and all of those, skills, and or at least the knowledge to really successfully manage their business. And so when you open a business, instead, the city and the state would never, they don't send you a welcoming package saying, thank you so much for opening a business in New York City and creating employment, which I think they should be doing, right? You only hear from them most of the time when they walk into your business and look at your business and go and look around and say, you know what, you're not in compliance, this is a problem, you're in violation of this, of that regulation and all of that, and they give you a fine, right? Or you have to pay your taxes and things like that. That's, when you hear from that most of the time, that's a reality. So that's, the reality of our small businesses. And the challenges that they have been facing really became apparent, and the efficiency that that they might have really became apparent during the pandemic. That really hit hard for so many levels. And they were one of the, I would say, the small businesses were one of the groups most affected by the pandemic, economically, financially. I mean, and I'm not talking about all of the other stuff, because some of them lost family members and or employees, but the fact that they were hit so hard economically, and the fact that so many of them were not able to access any help was very apparent. And so when that happened, we realized that the challenges were really a lot more than what we thought that these businesses really were facing. And so still today, so many of them have not been able to access any funding.
What would be your call to action for your elected officials and your stakeholders, the philanthropic community, to ensure that these businesses, these micro enterprises that are really the fabric of our city, they draw people to the city, right?
Yep.
The small so-called ethnic
Yep.
food, the Latin American foods, the Caribbean foods, the artists and so on. That's what makes the city vibrant and attractive.
Yes.
And so without them, we don't have, New York City would be a different place. So what is your call to action for those, in leadership positions who have the resources, the power, I don't know, the decision-making responsibility around getting these resources to these micro enterprises?
Yes. And you said it, Anasa, the small businesses here, people come to New York because there is so much diversity in terms of food and music and arts and all of that. I mean, just looked at what happened during the pandemic when we closed, when our businesses were ordered closed. New York City became a dead city. It became a dead city. This city economically, financially relies a lot on tourism. And tourism, tourists come here because of that, because what we have to offer, the diversity of the city of New York. And one of the things is also that the small businesses are part of the economic engine of this city. They are collectively the second largest employer of the city of New York. They provide the majority of the small businesses, and they provide the majority of the jobs, and they provide the majority of the jobs in communities of color, because that's a reality. The reasons why so many immigrants are own micro enterprises is because they have opened a business to create employment for themselves and for their family most of the time. That's what happens. So when a small business closes, you losing, it's not only the business owner that is losing his, her job, it's an entire family that gets affected, because then you have employees and their families get affected. And that's something that, our elected officials have to realize. These small businesses, these micro businesses are jobs providers in the city of New York. So we have to make sure that these jobs continue to exist. We have to make sure that these jobs continue to exist, because we have to make sure that our families are getting food on the table, that our families can pay their rent. That's what it translates to at the end of the day, because these micro businesses are not becoming millionaire. They're not. When you look at them, they're not. They're just like regular people in the community. And that's what we have to look at. So they had to put resources in place for them. And they have to hold people accountable in the sense that, and I understand sometimes it's hard for the elected officials to have to decide, do we put funding to help the small businesses, or do we put funding for affordable housing, for instance, and I know that's a tough decision, but it's not, these things are intertwined. They're intertwined because that person that has that business and has a job in that business and employs other people, those are the same people that lives in the affordable housing. So we have to find a way to help these micro businesses. And there are a lot of ways. And one of the ways that they can always do that, Anasa, and I don't think we do that enough, is to bring the major corporations to the table. That those corporations that rely on the small businesses and the micro enterprises to sell their products and services, or that they sell their products and services to. The Verizons of the world, the Canedisons of the world, the Coca-Colas of the world, the Pepsis of the world, all of them. And then let's talk about the banks, the financial institutions. Do you know how much money these financial institutions made from the PPP? A lot. A lot, because the government paid them to do the PPP. It wasn't a free service. It wasn't. They made a lot of money during the pandemic. They did. So they have to, I think they have a responsibility to give back to those small businesses, to make sure that those small businesses continue to exist, because those are their clients. But I think the government has to intervene. The government has to bring them to the table and hold them accountable as well. Because if the small businesses close, that's revenue lost to the city of New York, also in tax-paying dollars. And these big corporations that sell to the bodegas, for instance, right? They lose their clients. And they have to realize that. And I think that if the elected officials talk to these companies and bring them to the table and make them see that, they're going to see it. They're going to do something about it. So it's not like we're asking the elected officials just to take, the taxpayers' dollars and use it for, we're going beyond that and saying, no, there's a lot of things that you can do. But I think it has to be kind of like a, public-private effort, because this is our city. And at the end, we all benefit from, these small businesses having these micro enterprises. And I will tell you, Anasa, even what is happening with the safety of the city, the crime going up, all of these things that are happening, we don't want businesses closed. Because when that happens, also the crime goes up. So there's a lot of things there, and they have to look at it that way.
Absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head on a number of fronts. First of all, it doesn't have to be a housing or small businesses, kind of conversation. As you said, there's an important nexus there. Small businesses contribute to the safety of blocks. I know for a number of commercial corridors that you're familiar with, West Harlem Group and a number of other organizations, they attribute the safety and the vibrancy of those blocks to the small businesses. They're a resource for the tenants, many of whom are low income, many of whom are made up of young people who don't have a lot of opportunities, and the small businesses provide those opportunities. They keep the blocks safe. They keep the blocks clean. They're an important part of the community. And I also think that this whole conversation about not having enough funding, I've been hearing that there's a lot of unspent funding intended for low-income communities, communities of color, Black and Brown communities that are supposed to, that were supposed to be spent or allocated, but there's a lack of capacity, on the ground or in certain communities, or there are all these hoops you have to jump through to get the funding.
Yes, that's true.
So like, I think what you're saying about the public-private partnerships is also about making sure that the organizations, the businesses, and a lot of what you're doing around, similar to the accelerator program, is like, how do you prime all of these stakeholders, all of the businesses, the organizations like yourself, the community development organizations to kind of properly receive and allocate these funds, because there are billions of dollars.
Yes, there are. Yes, there are.
Means translates into maybe tens of millions or hundreds of millions for New York City.
Yes.
So.
You're absolutely right. As a matter of fact, we have been working with the state with their COVID relief grant, the COVID-19 relief grant for the small businesses. And we, one of the roadblocks were some of the criteria of the grant. So now they have changed it. They, for instance, at the beginning, if you had a loss in one of the years, I forgot which one, you couldn't qualify. You were not able to apply, but now they changed some of those rules. But for instance, we had a contract with the state to help the businesses apply. Our contract ended, but they still have all this funding that has not gone out. And so they changed the criteria. We have been asking for that for a while. So they finally did. But now they want us to continue. No, they send us the information, and we are going to continue working with the clients and Anasa, even though we're not getting paid by the state to do this. Why? Because the way I see it is our businesses need our help at this moment in time. So, I'm not happy that the state is not going to pay us, because they should, because we're going to continue doing the work, but we have to make sure that that money gets to our people. And that's an example of what you were just talking about, that there's money out there. But if we don't talk to the business owners, if we don't make that call, if we don't bring them in, if we don't help them with the application, first of all, they're not going to know, because some of them, for instance, apply and they were disqualified because they didn't meet the criteria. Now they change the criteria, which makes a lot of them able to apply. They qualify, but they don't know.
Wow.
So, but they, and now there is nothing being said about it. Before, it was a big thing, because one of the things that I noticed that is happening on us, and this is very dangerous, is that it's almost like, oh, the pandemic it slowed down. It's like it's because before there was a lot of talk about it. There was a lot of it was in the news, it was this, and then people were getting a lot of attention because they were doing these programs and everybody was coming out to talk about it. And now it's like nobody's talking about it. Nobody's talking, as if it's not important anymore, as if the businesses are okay when they're not. They're still in crisis. We're still in a pandemic, because that's a reality. And they're still in crisis. They went from surviving, merely surviving, to recovering, trying to recover right now. And you got to remember that these businesses were ordered closed by the state. They didn't close themselves because they wanted to. They were ordered closed. So the state owes them. The country owes them. So to me, it's like, okay, you order them closed. You have the responsibility to at least pay their expenses for that time that they were closed, because those expenses, they were still charged for rent. Connecticut was still charging them. They still had to pay insurance. So they were still incurring all these expenses, but nobody is responsible for it. They are. So they're playing catch up. They're still playing catch up right now. And then the time where they reopen, but the clients, a lot of these businesses were not getting a lot of clients. It took them a while. I mean, it's still today. Clients are still coming in slowly. Some of them lost clients that died. So it's all of these things that are happening, and all of a sudden it's like we can't pretend that they're okay, because it's not true. And that's what seems to be happening right now.
Well, so true. I think it's problematic and troubling when the way our news cycle works, or the way the alarm, the issue of the moment changes frequently, and people are still reeling from,
Yes.
sickness and recovery, and the loss of families and clients, as you said, and their support system, and that there's, and the way that things were done, it was an urgent situation, but it didn't really entail a lot of planning and collaboration, kind of checking in with communities to see the best way to address the challenges. But
and they don't realize, they don't acknowledge that this, the especially the micro businesses, that they're still in crisis, they're still in crisis, and that they still need the help and the resources.
Wow. And so with all of these constraints, you're still New York Women's Chamber of Commerce. You are still plugging through. You're like, we don't care if we don't get funding. We're still going to. You are still, creating results and adding value in incredible ways, lifting up your community in incredible ways. How do you talk through what you see as the keys to your success over this 20-year period? What makes it possible? You have good years when you're getting tons of funding, and there's so much attention around minority businesses and all of that. And then as we said, the news cycle changes, the flavor changes, and now it's something else. But how do you stay in the game and just kind of stay so, kind of on top of things, despite the challenges? What do you see as your key to success?
I think that it's just being attuned with the community that we serve. To us, that is very important. And as people ask us, well, how do you get these many people to come to your workshops? And how are you able to get, the clients coming into your office? And I said, because we are connected to them. We are truly connected to them. We really care, and they know that. This is not just, oh, we're doing this because there's so much funding, or this is where the funding is. It's not true, because the reality is that the resources and funding for organizations that work in small businesses are kind of at the bottom of everything else. And so it's not true. We do it because we really care, because we understand the value of the small businesses in our community, because these are the people that look like us, because these are our brothers and sisters, our cousins, our friends. These are our families. These are our neighborhoods, our community, the friends that we grew up with that now decided they decided they were going to have a business, or the parents of our friends and the people that we know. And so to us, that's what it has become. And we understand, especially for me, and as a personally, as an immigrant, I came here as a kid, and so I'm a daughter of immigrants, and an immigrant myself, and I grew up in Harlem. So and that's why I decided to open the office here, even though people have said, well, how come you didn't, you're the New York Women's Chamber of Commerce, so how come you're not downtown? I said, that's not what it is. We are where we are needed. I mean, we go everywhere, but this is my community. This is where I grew up. I have ties here. I went to school here. And so this thing of, also because a lot of these small businesses, as I mentioned before, the micro businesses are owned by people that look like us. It's also a way that is a venue for the economic empowerment of our people. And that's where what I see. And I also, as an immigrant, see that this is owning your own business is the American dream, is the equivalent of the American dream for so many of us, for so many of us. And that is a way for many of our people of color, not only to become financially independent and to provide for their family, but also to build generational wealth. Because the truth is that you can be in a job, dead end job, for so many years and not go anywhere, while a business gives you an opportunity to go as far as you want to go. And that to me is so important. I believe, and I've always believed in this, that one of the best things that we can do in the city of New York or anywhere is to either two things: to create good paying jobs and to also have an environment, create an environment where somebody can start a business and be successful at it. That those areas to me are so important. And that really is the key to me that opens the door to financial empowerment, especially of people of color. So that's why I said, oh, even if the state doesn't pay me, we're still going to go out there and help them out. And when you hear the stories, Anasa, when you hear the stories, it's really a privilege, almost, I would say, to work with these people. When you hear the stories, when somebody comes in, like a lot of the women are women of the beauty salons during this pandemic, that we became the organization that was there for them. They couldn't apply for the PPP themselves. They couldn't apply for grants themselves a lot of the time. I mean, just the fact that the applications were only in English, that was a challenge. Just the fact that this application have to be done online, to so many, that was a challenge. So being attuned with the, with this community and being there for them and understanding their need and responding to their needs and see the results, that's what really motivates me to keep going and working with them. and to, and I will tell you this too, and I often use the phrase, it takes a village, because it really does take a village. um I've been very blessed to, and as I to have people that support the organization, that really support the mission of the organization, that understands that the work that we do is valuable. And we saw that through the pandemic. We saw, foundations approaches. We saw organizations like Liz, who we have never really had the opportunity to work with, and they just came in, and we were able with them to do grants to women entrepreneurs of color that were not getting the PPP loan, for instance, could not get the PPP loan. So we have been able throughout this 20 years to find people, to find people, because organizations are really people. That's the reality, that really understand the importance of what we do, really understand that we're all about, the economic empowerment of people of color, especially women of color. And they understand that that without, organizations like the New York Women's Chamber of Commerce, it's harder. It's really difficult for people to access the resources, these micro enterprises to access the resources and the tools that they need to succeed. Yeah.
Wow. So any final thoughts? You shared your call to action, but any final thoughts before we wrap up?
It's, I would say that in terms of us, the New York Women's Chamber of Commerce will continue to do what we do, and there's going to be some changes, because one of the things that, and again, is changes based on, in response to what we've seen and where our businesses are today, and being able to to work with them, and to address, and to work with the city and state, because with the government as well, because the reality is that we need the government also, because we need legislation that are going to help our small businesses grow, and especially our people of color. Going back to the whole about economic empowerment, about inclusion and diversity, and all of that wonderful stuff that we talk about, that we need to do more when it comes to that. And so we really need to not just talk, but to do, and to put the resources in place for organizations that work with people of color to be able to work with these communities. Because one of the things that we also have to look at is that it's not only small businesses, and especially the small businesses of people of color, that are left behind. It's also institutions and organizations that are led by people of color that are left behind. We don't get the same resources. So that's also something to look at. So when we talk about inclusion and diversity and equity, we have to talk about what that means. And we have to talk about what that means at every level and every area, meaning education, meaning jobs, meaning business opportunities, meaning access to capital, access to money that nobody wants to really talk about, access to money and resources. Because that's what, to me, that's what really the diversity and inclusion and equity translates to. And we have to hold people accountable. We have to hold companies, agencies accountable, and say to them every year, and not just every moment in time, what are you doing to make this happen? Show me your numbers. Show me your numbers. And so that's what we now looking to be, more involved. Not that we have not been, because we always have been very involved in that, especially with the MWBE. But we want to make sure that those opportunities are coming to our people.
Wow. Show us your numbers. I love that. It's about what they call results-based accountability. What are your metrics? How many people are you serving, and how much money?
Yes.
How is money? How are funds being deployed? Which institutions?
Yes. I want to know all of that. I want to know, for instance, these foundations, how many organizations that are led by people of color to serve people of color are you funding? Because one of the things that we saw in Anasa that I noticed during the pandemic, how many people that were not working with small businesses, that were not working with businesses of color, owned by people of color, all of a sudden they were working with that community and getting all this funding, and they're not people of color. So it's one of those things. And then they will be contacting organizations that work with people of color to help them have access to that community. Yeah. So foundations need to take a look at that. Agencies, city and state agencies need to take a look at that in terms of employment also, and the corporations as well. We need to pass legislation that looks at that. And even with the fair wage legislation that we were able to pass a couple of years ago, what are we doing to make sure that companies are really in compliance? Are we doing audits, to see how much they're paying, or what's happening there? So that's what I mean. Like, we would show me, we have to look at the numbers. Yeah,
absolutely. Wow, there's so much. You have to go on and on.
I don't know why you did this, Anasa.
Oh, I had to invite you. You have I looked up and I saw your 20th anniversary email came across.
Yes.
I'm like, what? Hasn't been 20 years?
I was shocked too. I'll tell you. I said, oh my goodness. And I have to thank you, Anasa, because as I said before, it really takes a village. It really takes a village. And and I always tell the story of how we got to, this wonderful space where we are, and how we're still, not paying, the high rent that the city demands, because of you. Because you have been instrumental, were instrumental. You believed in us. And that's what I mean. You believe. We have just really started pretty much. Mm-hmm. And you believed in us. And that's, I think that's what have kept us throughout the years, is that, throughout these years, we have had people that have really believed in the New York Women's Chamber of Commerce and what we do. And, and I'm blessed. And I thank God and, life for that. And all of these, partners that, that have been there for us, because we couldn't, and nobody, I don't care what people say, you can't really do, this type of work or any type of work in, in organizations, nonprofits, especially if you don't have the support. It just doesn't happen. And that's why that support is so important, because it translates to really, impacting, the communities.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for all that you do. We always have such lively discussions. So I'm not going to keep you, but I hope you'll come back. And we'll see you soon.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay.